We're in a very interesting place today. I'm Joseph, this is Input English. This channel is for comprehensible input, but for comprehensible input to work for you, what you watch and what you listen to needs to be interesting. So I try to make episodes that people around the world might find interesting. I'm in an interesting place. That is, it's interesting to me, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm in Santa Cruz on the Pacific coast, and this is the Santa Cruz Harbor. This is a busy harbor with lots of things going on, and so I thought I would walk you around the harbor and let you see what is here and see what it has to offer. This harbor is not all about recreation. There is a lot of commercial activity at this harbor. Historically, I have a connection with this harbor because we used to keep a boat here. As you see behind me, there are lots of boats. Some of them are power boats, that is, they are powered by an engine, and then other boats are sailboats. A lot of these sailboats, probably most of these sailboats, also have an auxiliary motor. A sailboat is usually primarily propelled by its sails, but for purposes of maneuvering, getting into the harbor, and when the wind is not dependable, it's very nice to have an auxiliary motor. The auxiliary motor for a sailboat may take a couple of forms. One, it can be built into the boat. In that case, we would call it an inboard motor. An inboard motor is low in the boat, and there is a propeller shaft that comes out through the hull so that the propeller can turn and provide propulsion. Inboard motors for auxiliary use on sailboats can be powered by gasoline or by diesel. Both are popular. An alternative to an inboard motor is an outboard motor. That is a motor that clamps onto a motor mount, and you will see some here as I show you around. In general, outboard motors are less expensive than inboard motors. This harbor is run by the government of Santa Cruz County. It has a lot of regulations for the purpose of safety and also the comfort of visitors and people who use this harbor. Parking is not easy. If one has a slip and keeps a boat here and thus pays every month for that privilege, a parking permit is issued. For those of us who don't have a boat in the harbor, we have to pay hourly or daily. Here you can see an American egret standing on that rock. To my eye, the egret is standing on one leg. I find that common with shorebirds, that they frequently stand on a single leg. It's extraordinary that we are able to be this close to a wild bird. It appears that this bird has gotten very used to being near to humans. One of the nice features of this park is that it has a lot of benches like this one. This bench was donated in memory of someone who has passed. A lot of benches like this in the Santa Cruz area are memorial benches. This is one of those memorial benches. It's a nice place to sit in the sun on a cool day and observe the harbor. The harbor is a peaceful place to visit. You never really know what you're going to see in this harbor. I didn't expect to see that American egret. Sometimes marine animals come into the harbor. I have seen sea lions in this harbor in the past. As we continue, I am encountering some construction. There is work being done here at the harbor, and so they have commandeered some of the parking lot to store their equipment. They have blocked the sidewalk, so I have to walk around this area that is set up as a construction zone. In this area, we have some dry storage. This is a part of the parking lot which is allocated to storing boats. The boats here, some of them are stored on the ground. They're just put on little pads so that the hull is not damaged. And then other boats are stored on trailers. The statistics for the Santa Cruz Harbor are fairly simple. There are slips for 1,000 boats to be moored in this harbor in the water. In addition, there are 275 spaces for dry storage like this. You can imagine that dry storage is less convenient to the boat owner, because if one wants to use a boat and it's in dry storage, then it has to be maneuvered to the water and launched. It has to be put in the water. We call that launching a boat. There's another meaning for the word launch. Instead of being an activity like putting a boat in the water, it can be an object. It can be a boat. If someone is on a very large yacht or a ship, and then they use a very small boat or a much smaller boat to go somewhere rather than maneuvering this giant vessel, then that small boat that allows people to come and go from the big boat is called a launch. Behind me is the harbor master's office. I have, over the years, dealt with the harbor master a lot because, as I said, we kept a boat here for many years. I went into this office to talk to the harbor master personnel and pay the monthly rent on our slip. Here we are at the boat launching area. This is the boat ramp, the launching ramp. You can call it a boat ramp or a launching ramp. This is where a boat on a trailer and the tow vehicle will back down, and as the boat attains buoyancy, it is lifted out of the trailer and then released. At that point, the owner of the truck needs to make sure that the truck is secure with the brakes on so that it doesn't slide into the water. And then they need to manage the boat to get it away from the trailer and take it to a place that it can be tied up while they put their trailer and truck away. There's a lot of parking in this parking lot for trucks and trailers so that people can come here, launch their boat, and then store the truck and trailer in this parking lot. At the end of their sailing session, they can come back and reverse the process, taking the boat out of the water and proceeding on their way. This egret is different than the one I showed you earlier. This one has a black bill and the other one had a yellow bill. They're probably different species or different varieties. In the water next to me is a boat I'm walking past, and this kind of a boat, this type of boat, is called a RIB, rigid inflatable boat. Here we are on the fuel dock. This is where you bring your boat, and it's like a gas station. You can fuel up your boat. These points to tie up one's boat are called cleats. So you can tie up your boat to these cleats and then pump fuel, either diesel or gasoline, into your boat. This gas pump is for regular gasoline. As I continue walking on this fuel dock, I come out to the end and one can see that they are doing some dredging. This harbor fills up with sand and it can become shallow enough that boats can't pass. So they have the unenviable task of dredging the sand and removing it to maintain an open path to the ocean. Here you can see a barge with the dredging equipment. You can also see the lighthouse. And then beyond the lighthouse, you can see the Pacific Ocean. Actually, that would be Monterey Bay, but it goes directly out into the Pacific. I'm now up on the upper deck of the fuel dock, and you can see the extent of this harbor. The boats in this harbor come in all different sizes. Some of them are too big to fit into a slip. These boats here are in slips. They are in little cubbies, little places for the boat to be docked, and usually they have dock access on only one side. There are some harbors where the slips have walkways on both sides of the boat, but the walkway is only available on one side. When you tie up your boat in a slip here, we refer to that location, that slip, as a berth. These boats are berthed here. When the boat is too big, like those over there, they won't fit into a slip, and so they have to use an end berth. The big boats are end berths. They're on the end of this finger. Each of these rows of slips that have a common walkway are called fingers. There are a lot of fingers in this harbor. Each finger offers a lot of slips or berths. In the background, you can see a bridge, and that bridge allows one to drive an automobile from one side of the harbor to the other. As you will see, there's a lot more harbor on the other side of that bridge. Right this minute, that bridge is a construction site and it is closed to traffic. Here you can see storage for kayaks. Ocean kayaking is very popular here in Santa Cruz. This is storage for outrigger canoes. The technology and tradition of this type of watercraft harkens from Hawaii. These boats are owned by and used by teams who regularly come here and launch the boats and participate in the sport of outrigger canoeing. I'm not real familiar with this sport, but I have seen people in teams managing these very long and heavy boats. Each of these harbor fingers, each of these docks, is gated. They don't want the public in here, so there is a locked gate. There are also fences extending beyond the gate to discourage people from trying to climb over or around the locked gate. They don't want people here who have no business on this dock. Having a boat in this harbor is not inexpensive. You can see some businesses here that help boat owners with things that need to be done. The Down Under Diving Service has scuba diving workmen who come by on a scheduled basis and clean the bottom of the boat. This is an important service, and this is one I paid for every month to keep my boat in good shape. Next to that business is an electronics store that has all sorts of technology to make boating more fun and safer. Next to that, there is a marine store that has some fittings for boats and then a lot of supplies for fishing as well as snacks. I told you that some activity in this harbor is commercial in nature. These boats in this area are commercial fishing boats. These are not recreational boats. You wouldn't call that a yacht, you would call it a fishing boat. This is a company that sells fish that have been caught in the Pacific. This is where they do maintenance work and restoration on boats. It's a busy place. Boats need regular maintenance, and these are the experts that provide that service here. They have a very large hoist that they can lift a very heavy boat out of the water and then transport it to a place that it can be stored in dry storage. They have a very elaborate system for supporting boats when they're out of the water. You can see a couple of boats that are being stored out of the water while maintenance is being done. These are outboard motors here. There are two of them. They're 300 horsepower outboard motors. Usually one can walk in this direction behind me, and the sidewalk goes under the bridge, under the road, and takes one to the upper harbor. Everything I've shown you down here with all these sailboats, power boats, commercial fishing boats has been in the lower harbor. We're going to now drive around, since I cannot walk, and I'll show you the upper harbor. If you've watched a lot of videos on this channel, you might have seen a video in which I explained that I lived on a boat in the Marina del Rey harbor. I lived at Marina del Rey on a 27-foot sailboat. I lived there for 1 year during an episode in my training. When we moved up here to Northern California, we had no boat. But that was relatively short-lived because at work they had scheduled a big retreat. The organization with whom I worked had a big retreat, and they hosted the workforce, they hosted us to come to a resort near to here. At that retreat, they had a lot of presentations, a lot of discussions, and I found it a little boring. So after having sampled what they were offering, I found what I thought was better use of my time. In other words, I split. I just left. This was a multi-day event, and we were staying in a hotel room hosted by the employer. After I left that conference looking for more interesting things to do, I came here to the Santa Cruz harbor to just take a look, much like I'm doing today. When I got to one of these docks in the lower harbor, perhaps the next one up, I saw a boat that had a for sale sign on it. When boat owners want to sell their boat, they might put up a notice on a bulletin board, or they might just put a sign on the sail cover. And people walking by might take a look and say, I want to investigate that. Well, that's what happened. And to make a long story short, I bought that boat. Now this time I didn't live on it. It was just a boat that I would sail with my wife and with friends here in the Pacific Ocean. We had that boat for many years, but I didn't use it as much as I would have liked because it was fairly far away from where we were living at the time. Also, we did not have a berth here in the lower harbor. We were berthed in the upper harbor. Well, now you can probably figure out the problem with that. If the boat needs to go under the bridge, how do you deal with the problem of that mast sticking up? The boat I bought had a rig, had a mast, and all the equipment that goes with it that allowed that mast to tilt over in a controlled way. Not just collapse, but tilt over in a very controlled way so that I could drive the boat under the bridge. Once clear of the bridge, we would reverse the process and bring the mast up to vertical. Then we would hook all the rigging back up and we were fine. Lowering the mast on a big sailboat is an unpleasant chore. And so you can imagine that having a berth in the upper harbor is not real popular. It's doable, but it's a real chore to lower that mast. We're now in the upper harbor. I had to drive around and park down here in this location. This is the upper harbor. We are beyond that bridge. The reason I stopped here is this is where we kept our boat years ago. You can see that there are a lot fewer boats that have masts. And all of these masts would have to be rigged so that they could be lowered so that they can go under the bridge. Because of that, this upper harbor is more popular with powerboats and less popular with sailboats. Very large sailboats really are not rigged to lower the mast. It's just too much of a mess. So people only lower the rig on boats of a certain size, say 25 to 30 feet. Larger than 30 feet, don't expect to lower the rig. I remember fondly coming here to take care of the boat, to go sailing. Even though I described lowering the mast as a chore, it was very doable and not very difficult. So I enjoyed coming here. Eventually we decided to sell the boat, but I didn't put a notice up on a bulletin board or an ad. I didn't try to promote selling the boat. I had just decided that at some point I would sell the boat. I got a phone call one day from a fellow who asked me if I might want to sell my boat. I thought it was very odd that he would call me when I had decided to sell the boat, but I had not yet notified anyone of my intent. It turns out that he had noticed my boat, and he noticed that it wasn't being used very much. He had decided to find a bargain, that is, a boat that was in good shape, but not a very high price. He was hoping that I would sell him the boat at a reasonable price. Well, that is exactly what came to pass. We made a deal, and we made arrangements to have him come so that I could show him how all the systems on the boat worked. He had taken a test drive before he decided to buy it, but he came out to learn the systems of the boat, and then the plan was to lower the rig, drive the boat under the bridge, and then haul it out of the water so that the bottom of the boat could be inspected and painted. That's fairly common. That's a reasonable thing to do. He asked me when I wanted to do that, and I looked at my schedule and found a time, and I came down here and met him. We did exactly as planned, and at the end, he looked at the bottom of the boat. He saw that the hull was in good shape, and so we finished the sale. I signed over the title to him, and he wrote me a check for the amount. The boat was sold, and it was out of the water. Now, what we didn't know at the time was that something was happening at exactly that same time, thousands of miles from here in Japan. I sold that boat on the day of the Fukushima earthquake and disaster. The Fukushima earthquake resulted in a tidal wave that came as far as Santa Cruz. The huge wave came into this harbor and destroyed a lot of these boats. The boats that were around where we had kept our boat were sunk, destroyed, severely damaged, you name it. They were ruined, and there was a lot of expense and insurance claims to be dealt with. Some of the boats actually sank and needed to be pulled up from the bottom of the harbor. When that tidal wave hit this harbor and created all this destruction, the boat that I had just sold was safely in dry storage. It was in that storage area where the boatyard does maintenance, and it was destined to have the hull painted. Lucky for the new owner that he had his boat, his new boat, out of the water when that tidal wave hit. I also was very fortunate because I did not own a boat in this harbor when the tidal wave hit. So the both of us benefited a lot by our choice of that day to pull the boat out of the water. In order to operate a boat this big, one needs to know the rules and needs to know a lot of facts about navigating on the water. Courtesy is a big part of that activity. There are rules of right-of-way. Some boats have the right-of-way and other boats need to yield. In general, power boats are more maneuverable than our sailboats, and so it is common for the right-of-way to go to the sailboat. On the other hand, very large watercraft are less maneuverable than small sailboats, and so a very large craft might be given the right-of-way by a sailboat. This is all playing out in the mind of the boat operators with attention to courtesy. There's a long-standing dissonance between powerboat owners and sailboat owners. I can remember that a friend of mine who was an avid sailboat sailor referred to powerboats as stink boats. He was referring to their motor exhaust. I found that amusing, but I didn't use that term of art. I didn't think it was appropriate to disparage a group of people. A lot of these boats have dinghies. A dinghy is a small boat that is used in conjunction with a larger boat. Dinghy is a funny word. I don't know its origin, but it's an old term, and it has a funny spelling. It's D-I-N-G-H-Y, dinghy. For people who have dinghies or kayaks, there is storage alongside the dock where they can keep their dinghy or their kayak. Some people stay on their boat overnight. I don't know how many people live aboard these boats. In Marina del Rey, it was common for people to live aboard. I don't know the statistics for this harbor, but I overheard a conversation and one of the fellows explained that he would be spending the night on his boat. I spoke about the disadvantage of having a boat in the upper harbor that is a sailboat if one has to lower the rig, but there are advantages to being in the upper harbor. The water is smoother in this upper harbor and the area is sheltered from wind. For a boat owner, particularly a sailboat owner, it's easier to maneuver one's boat into the slip with less wind. A windy environment gives real challenges to the operator of a boat, particularly a sailboat. Here you see a powerboat with an outboard motor, and then there is an inflatable globular object. It's round, but it has markings on it. You see what looks like eyes. One of the challenges that boat owners have is related to animals and birds that tend to roost on these boats. The trouble with birds like seagulls and cormorants is their droppings. They can really soil a boat and leave the owner with a lot of chores to clean up a mess. It has been observed that seagulls stay away from owls. And it has also been observed that patterns like that eye shape on that round yellow object tend to repel seagulls. Some places, sea lions can be a big problem for the boat owners. I don't remember any big problems with sea lions here. Some people come to the Pacific to fish. They come here to catch fish. At least in the past, people would go fishing for salmon in Monterey Bay. When one catches a fish, it is necessary to do some things to prepare that fish for use as food. Seagull. That process of using a knife to process a fish that has been recently caught we call cleaning the fish. Usually that includes removal of the internal organs, the intestines, and all the internal organs. Sometimes people remove the head. Sometimes people remove all the bones. If you have a piece of fish and you've removed all the bones, that piece of fish is referred to as a fillet. If one fillets a fish, there is some waste involved. Some of the meat is lost, but it's much easier for people to eat. When we kept our boat here and sailed in the Pacific, we never fished. And so I've actually never used this station for cleaning fish. That was a very interesting experience. When I stopped in front of that fish cleaning station, there were no seagulls. As soon as I stopped in front of that place, seagulls arrived and started screaming. And I think this is learned behavior. I think that the seagulls in this area have learned that if a human being goes to that fish cleaning station, there's going to be some food available. And so they call to each other and they congregate. I found it a little alarming to be standing there innocently making a video, and all these birds were flying overhead, screaming at the top of their lungs. I think I stimulated that behavior by standing close to the fish cleaning station. Now that I've walked away from it, things are calming down. If you have not yet subscribed to the Input English YouTube channel, please do so. It's a free subscription. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.